Now, my grandfather Snarr, there were three brothers of my grandfather who left Salt Lake City and went to Idaho Falls, to Homestead. Now, to understand what really Homestead means is the following. It all came about because of Abraham Lincoln. Everyone says, well, Abraham Lincoln, he preserved and saved the Union, which he did do, and he freed the slaves, which he did do. And that's about the end of it in terms of him, as taught in the history books. Far short. Terrible what they teach in today's world. Abraham Lincoln, after 30-plus years of arguing in the Congress of the United States as to how we can expand this country, he got through Congress the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act opened up the West. It was miraculous what happened. Now, the Homestead Act was as follows. You could take and get 130 acres with just putting an X on a piece of paper. You got this 130 acres. It doesn't cost you anything, but you have to live on it for 5 years. Now, if you don't want to live on it for 5 years, then it'll cost you between $2 to $5, depending upon where you live or where you find that 130 acres. Now, Americans being what they are, a lot of them would say, especially in certain parts of the West, well, what if there's a little minerals underneath this plot of land I've got? Or in this area, what about that? Well, then they say, okay, you can have another 130 acres for the same price. So now you're 260 acres. Then in eastern Idaho, they say, well, what if there's a forest nearby here? And next thing you know, it was possible to homestead 1,200 acres without spending a cent if you'll just live on that acreage. And so it opened up the West. Now, the problem is, let's assume that you end up with 1,200 acres, and you say to yourself, well, what am I going to do with these potatoes that I have planted and I'm growing? I can't eat all these potatoes. So the 120 acres or 1,020 acres means nothing if you can't ship the goods that you're raising. So Lincoln got passed the Railroad Act, which is basically simultaneously done with the Homestead Act. And that opened the West, the combination. The money that was poured in to the western part of America to build these railroads was unbelievable. It opened it all up. And they came from Europe. They came from all over the world, people who had never owned anything. Their families had never owned anything prior to them. Impossible. All they were serfs. They came and settled this western part of America because of the Homestead Act and the Railroad Act. And so my family, or my progenitors, they came and settled in Idaho Falls. 4 brothers. Now, my grandfather settled on 360 acres.